Okay, everybody, how are you? This is the notes for section 1.6. We're going to be multiplying, dividing real numbers. The first kind of definition we have to do is reciprocal. Another word that kind of goes with it is to flip, okay, or switch. Right, we're going to kind of talk about that a little bit and add a little bit of notes. So make sure you leave yourself some room here, because I'm going to give you some other examples that go with this definition. All right. So reciprocals are really talking about taking a fraction and flipping it. So they use letters here first. Just a over b. When I take its reciprocal, I flip it. It becomes now b over a. So not too difficult there. So using actual real numbers here, and let me just kind of show you, instead of using a and b, well, let's use some real numbers. If I have 3/5, I want to flip it and it becomes now 5 over 3, okay? One other thing that goes with this definition, if I take that number, 3 over 5, and I multiply it to its reciprocal, now 5 over 3, it comes out to always be 1, okay? So 3 times 5 is 15 on the top, and then 5 times 3 on the bottom is 15 on the, and so that gives me a top and bottom of being 15, and I can reduce that down to 1. Okay, I could cross cancel if I wanted to. I get 1s everywhere, so I can get 1 that way also. Okay, so it's just a way to check that if I take a number's reciprocal, that I'm doing it right. Okay. Now, a couple other kind of situations that come up that are a little unique to this. If I have a whole number 2 and I want to take its reciprocal, I want to flip that, okay? Now, got to remember that every number, whole number at least, is written over 1 as a fraction, but we don't write numbers like that, okay? So, but when I flip it, then I should get 1 over 2, okay? When I take its reciprocal. The other example I want to make sure we understand is if you get a fraction like this with a 1 on the top, I flip it, well, it is technically going to be 4 over 1, but we don't write it like that. It's really just going to be 4. So just some uniqueness to that rule of flipping or switching something to make sure that we understand how we can do it with these kind of unique situations, okay? Next thing we're going to talk about is multiplying directed numbers. So some basic rules that I think we all know. Just want to solidify our understanding of this. So this is saying a positive number times another positive number. So that dot really is signifying multiplication. So when I multiply 2 positive numbers, my answer is always going to be positive. Okay, so when I multiply a positive number with a negative number, and we could have the order switched. It could be negative first, positive second. It's going to be the same thing. My answer should always be negative. Okay, and then if I multiply 2 negative numbers together, my answer is always going to be negative. Okay, so one kind of rule that we can get, see if I can do this right. One rule that we can get is when the signs are the same, the answer is positive. Okay, and then with the other part of that rule, if the signs are different, then the answer is negative. Okay, so I think you've been doing that for a really long time. But this is a place where we make mistakes. We're not very careful with our work. We're not checking it. We're not really looking at stuff. We're kind of blowing through it because we think it's going to be easy. So it shouldn't be difficult, but we got to be careful. This is one of those things where you make this tiny little mistake here, you ruin the whole problem. And we don't want to make those tiny mistakes anymore, okay? All right, so moving on, just really quick, some, common sense here. Look at the problem first. I see that the signs are different, therefore I know my answer has to be negative, okay? And now what is just 12 times 8? Well, it's 96, but it's going to be negative 96, okay? When I have something like this, then once again, I look at those two numbers, are both positive, so I know my answer has to be positive, okay? And then 24 times 0.5 should get me 12. Okay, so just use some common sense. Look at the problem first, take a second, look at it. What should my answer be? In this case, I'm looking at, is it going to be positive or negative? Okay, so looking at this last one, both the signs are negative. So remember what we just said, if the signs are the same, it's always positive. Okay, and then -3, or I'm not even going to look at the negatives now. 3/4 times 1/2 is going to get me 3 over 8. I'm just going to multiply the tops, gives me 3. Multiply the bottoms, gives me 8. I look to see if I can reduce it if I can, but nothing goes into 3 and 8 except for 1. And that's not going to change my answer. Okay? So use some common sense first. Don't try to do the problem. Look at it, follow a rule, know what your answer is going to be, and then you know what? Forget about the signs. Just multiply the numbers and you know what the sign should be when you're done. Okay? Right. When we have stuff like this, this minus sign is going to be here all the time. Okay, so I'm just right now, I'm going to put it right there. This square root symbol is asking you what number times itself is equal to the number inside. Okay, let me fix this here. Sometimes with the video, that side of the screen gets cut off. It is equal to the number inside. Okay, you got to remember that when I'm recording. Okay, so I'm asking myself what number if I multiply it to itself, gives me 25. And that's called a perfect square. So it's a concept we'll learn a little bit later. But I know that 5 times 5 gets me 25. But my answer is going to be negative because the sign is outside. Okay. This little plus and minus sign is also another kind of math concept we get later. I'm just going to reuse it. And now I'm going to ask myself first, what number times itself gives me 4? So 2 times 2 gives me 4. And then I ask myself what number gets me 49. And I hope I remember that it's 7 times 7. Okay. So just kind of a square root thing that you should have gotten a little bit of this before. Hopefully you remember what a perfect square is. Not every number that you're going to have in here is going to be perfect. Like I'll just give you an example. Like the square root of 7. What number times itself gives me 7? Well, nothing. The only way I can get 7 by multiplication is that. Okay. So some numbers you get in there, now I'd have to use my calculator and punch in a square root button and put in the number and get a decimal answer. Okay. But we'll hopefully not run into that too much. Okay. All right. So we have this skydiver jumps out of a plane. This elevation is going to change 3,600 feet in 4 minutes after the parachute opens. What's the elevation change each minute? Well, when I'm falling out of a plane, I'm going in a negative direction from where I started. Okay, whatever that might be. And every 4 minutes, I drop that much. But the question's asking how much do I change each minute? So that's why I set up a little division problem, okay? I write it out as a fraction. Remember, you could write it out like this too. But I hope it makes sense why I'm using division, okay? And so when I do that, now we didn't really talk about this, but this is kind of multiplication in reverse. When I'm dividing numbers that have different signs, my answer should always be negative, okay? So when I do that, I think I'm going to get 900 feet per minute. Okay, so hopefully that was pretty kind of straightforward, okay? All right, so when dividing fractions, so this is the way this is called a complex fraction, okay? But that means I want to divide the top by the bottom, okay? If I wanted to, you know, it really would look like this if we kind of wrote it out the old-fashioned way, okay? So that's what they showed us here. So the rule for in math is when I do that, I want to take the reciprocal. So this goes back to the first thing we did today when we talked about reciprocal. I want to take the second fraction and I want to flip it. But then the other part of the rule is I change it to multiplication. Okay, so hopefully you've seen and heard this rule before. That maybe shouldn't be something that's new to you, but you know, if you missed it or didn't really understand it before, hopefully we'll get that down. So when I multiply fractions, it's top to top and then bottom to bottom. It gives me 9/8. I always want to see if I can reduce it. There's nothing that goes into 9 and 8 except for 1, and that's not going to change anything. And I'm okay with you guys leaving it this way. I know some teachers like you to change it because this is an improper fraction now. The top is bigger than the bottom. So if you want to change it, how many times does 8 actually go into 9? It goes in once, but it doesn't go in evenly. To have 1 left over, and I put it over that 8. But I'm really okay with you guys leaving it that way. One thing I'm going to emphasize, though, is you have to reduce it. So if it's reducible, reduce it. If it's not, then you can leave it. Okay, so that's going to do it for that section. Want to make sure that if you have any questions, you know, contact me, email me, and let me know if there's something that you're not really sure about. We can kind of get that cleared up. Okay? All right, have a good one.